What brought you to New Mexico in the first place?
Well, I got a football scholarship to Eastern New Mexico out of my junior college in Phoenix. I went to Glendale Community, and Bill Blau, who is connected to Fred Blau, who was at University of New Mexico, he's his younger brother, and he was coming through and recruiting, and he offered me the scholarship. And Don Carthel just took over at Eastern, and so I went in there, played there.
What got you started in football in the first place?
I think it's just the love of the game. I grew up in Denver. My dad really loved the game. He played it in Montrose, Colorado, when he was in high school. And I started in Thornton Little League in Denver, Colorado, 9 years old. And I think just the love of the game. I loved the Denver Broncos when we were growing up there. And then we had to move to Phoenix, and it just continued there. My dad ended up passing away in 7th grade when I was in 7th grade, but then my coaches sort of kept me involved and kept me going, and they played a special part all the way up for me, and it really helped me out.
How difficult was that? I mean, losing your father at a somewhat early age.
It was tough. My mom, he had cancer for like 5 or 6 years, and we would go back and forth to San Diego Balboa Hospital. He was a Navy retired, and take chemotherapy, and then we would drive back to Phoenix. And anyway, ended up passing away in 1978. And my mom, though, was a strong lady, and she went to work at Kmart, and we just kept chugging along.
How would you describe kind of your childhood, either before that time or even after it?
I think I had to grow up quick with my dad passing there. I don't know that I became the man of the house, but I had to grow up and do things that most normal 13 and 14-year-olds didn't do. My summer jobs were, I laid rock and I did landscaping in Phoenix, and we'd work from 5 to 1, and then we'd have football practice from 4 to 7 at night, and 5 in the morning to 1 p.m. And but all my checks would go to my mom so that we could pay the bills.
What position did you play? What kind of player were you?
I was All-State. I was in the All-Star game in high school up in Flagstaff. I was a guard and a tackle through my years. I started as a sophomore at Thunderbird High School, and started as a junior at tackle, and then I went back to guard my senior year. We ended up having 3 coaches my last 3 years. The coach that really guided me and was actually at mine and Barbie's wedding, Chuck Zontanos, he left after my sophomore year and went to Glendale Community, and that's how I ended up there.
Not a lot of people still have relationships that are that close and invited to, weddings years and years down the line. What kind of relationship, did you have with that coach and other coaches that you have? Sounds like you were close.
Well, we still keep in touch. He's like 87 years old, and he congratulated me on retiring, here in May. And so we do keep in touch. He really was a guidance counselor at Thunderbird, and then when he went to Glendale, he was. In my first semester in college, we went to a bowl game for first time in school history at Glendale, and I started all 12 games, and I thought I was the man. Well, I only passed 7 credit hours that first semester, so I go in for end of year, end of season eval, and he lays out Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and says, you're going to go to one of these unless you pass these classes. And so I passed 17 credit hours in the spring, and I was good to go.
How did that hit home with you?
Oh, it hit home like between the chops. You need that type of person, especially when you don't have that male role model at home, to lay that out on the line for you. And it really got me focused, and I was able to finish my college career and get a diploma and all that, probably because of Coach Z.
What do you remember about your first time in New Mexico, and what kind of sticks with you?
Well, I'd never driven in snow, and when I first got here, and I got here in the summer, and we finished the season, and it started snowing at Eastern, and there was only one traffic light at Eastern, and we went out, and one of my buddies who went to El Dorado High School here at K.O. King, he was driving his truck, and he was showing me how to drive in the snow, and he was fishtailing and stuff, so it was fun. It was way different. Coming from Phoenix. I started all the games there, and I started my 7 games at Eastern, but then I blew my knee out. And in Phoenix, when you were injured, you went to state-of-the-art Phoenix Suns facility. That's where we went when we had anything wrong with us. At Eastern, it was this man named Bill Joy, and he was a horse owner. And I remember I blew my knee out 7th game, and it was pretty serious. And I started rehab, and he goes, well, you just sit off the edge of your bed and you put 2-gallon jugs of milk with water in them, milk jugs with water in them, and you just do leg extensions off the edge of your bed. And that's how I started my rehab. I was like, uh-oh. So it was funny.
So really growing up playing out of state, but then finding your way to the land of enchantment, what kept you here? I mean, you've been a mainstay within the coaching community and the football community at New Mexico for so long. What kept you here? What brought you back to, continue to be a coach?
Well, and what ended up happening when I blew my knee out, Coach Carthel and Coach Blau kept me on scholarship. And now Coach Z gave me the love of probably wanting to coach, Coach Santanos, but Coach Blau and Coach Carthel actually put me into the room. I mean, my senior year, they kept me on scholarship. I had to video. I had to drive to Lubbock, Texas. Had to drop off the film the night of the game in Clovis. Then they would ship it to Lubbock, and then the next morning I'd have to go pick it up in Clovis and drive it back so they would have film. So then they kept me in their coaches' meetings, and that really got me the love and knowing how to break down tape and look at specific things. And I just sit in there and took notes, and it was like coaching 101. And so when I finished, I met my wife at Eastern New Mexico. She went to Sandia and grew up in Albuquerque, and so I proposed to her, and we ended up getting married here. And then I stayed, been in Albuquerque the last 31 years. And when I first came into town, I didn't know anybody, and I didn't know who Bill Gentry was. My first 3 job interviews, I got a teaching job at Choate Elementary. I was a 5th grade teacher. And I wanted to coach football. And so I went to Coach Blau, give me some direction, my coach from Eastern. And I went and talked to Coach Gentry at El Dorado, and I talked to Coach Ottman at Sandia, and Coach Gabe Chavez at Manzano. And Coach Gentry, I couldn't be there by 10 minutes to 3. I'd be there by 3 because I had everything arranged where I could get over to practice by 3, but I couldn't be there by 10 minutes to 3, so he didn't even give me an interview. And then Coach Ottman interviewed me and said he'd get back to me. And the next day I interviewed with Gabe. And Gabe offered me the JV line job at Manzano and called the JV offense. And I took it, jumped at it.
And eventually when you became head coach at Manzano, what was that like?
It was a whirlwind. We had went through the summer. We were 1-9 the year before. And I was the O-line coach. And, a lot of stuff went wrong. But we were really building. It was something that Gabe really instilled some good stuff in the guys, and Coach Sheehan and myself were his main assistants, and we really had it rolling. Well, in mid-July, actually over 4th of July that year, Gabe went to El Paso, and where his wife's family was from, and he was offered a quarterback's coaching job down in El Paso. And so he took it like July 19th. And Mr. Whalen, who was, Tim Whalen was the principal at Manzano, he wanted to open the job up, and the 2 of my players who one of them ended up coaching for me, Heath and Jared Bevan, went to him and said, you just need to hire Coach Barker, and then you worry about it at the end of the season. And it ended up being at the end of the season, I ended up getting it. We went 7-3. They put me in on an interim basis, just like they did for Philip this year. And I told him that story, and it's funny how it goes way back. But we went 7-3, and it was just a phenomenal year, a good turnaround year. We ended up beating Las Lunas High School on the last play of the game, my first game ever as a head coach. And with 6 seconds left, quarterback Rusty Clare threw a touchdown pass to Ricky Camingo. And then we ended up beating the defending state champ La Cueva in game 5, 14-7, or 14-13, excuse me. And so we went 7-3 and got the job.
And in '96, you reached the title game with this group.
Yeah.
What's it like reaching that spot, a pinnacle that all coaches just want the opportunity to get to that game?
And I was 31, so I thought, I'm going to be in this game every year. And it was amazing. Those kids were phenomenal. That team, we had 9 guys start 2 ways. We dressed our whole JV and varsity against Mayfield. Mayfield brought up 4 buses that day. They had over 100 guys on the sidelines. We dressed our whole JV and varsity, and there were 43 guys. 9 guys, 2 ways. We just came off a victory against Clovis in the semis. The game was delayed, and Mayfield and Bobby Newcomb, Highland, and Mayfield were playing down at Milne, and their game started an hour before ours. The 4 inches of snow was on the ground. And so we come down the ramp, and I told the kids, first of all, we went back to the weight room at Manzano, and we let them go eat and stuff and ride their bikes down. to McDonald's right off Lomas, right? And then they come back and we start talking, Clovis is going to have heaters on the sidelines. Clovis got a $180,000 bus just for football only. We're telling them all this stuff, and sure enough, we get up to the stadium, and down the ramp comes 4 heaters for their sidelines. So they were just like going, it was like a meant to be thing. And we had set up, we had a girl kicker that year, Liz Wright, and she made both of the extra points, and their kicker actually missed one.
Is there, before we move on to your time at Sandia, we still want to remain at Manzano, is there a game, a memory, a player, when you look back at your time there with the Monarchs, that really stands out that you'll never forget, or even a game or a play?
Well, I talked about the first game ever there. I mean, to go down and we ended up winning. We were winning the whole game, and then Lunas came back. Lunas was 11-1 the year before, and they thought they were just going to blow us off the field, and they took the lead, and then we had minute 16 left, and we always did scenarios. My whole career, I'd give the guys a scenario, and we'd go from there, and the clock would be running, and just told them it's a scenario. We went down the field and scored, and Ricky Kamingo, who caught that touchdown pass a year later, was murdered by this man, Sebastian Eccleston, coming out of a Taco Bell, and he's always stuck with me, and I think he's always been behind me. He's been that angel over us. So that was a big play.
And what prompted the move to Sandia?
Well, my kids were getting older. I really, at that point, Rio Rancho had opened up and Sandia had opened up, and I was going to interview at both. Sandia is where my wife went. Sandia is right down the street from me. It's a great academic school. They'd been down for a few years, and I just thought I really liked the challenge of building. And that's the main reason that, as you put the pros and cons together, Rio Rancho was on like their 4th head coach in 5 years. I know Rio Rancho's won 2 state titles and they got all this stuff now. The guys give me some stuff about that, but it just ended up being the right fit for me at that time. My kids were all going to end up going there. As long as I was successful, they would end up going there, I guess. But it was just the right fit.
And in 2012, you reached the title game with the Matadors. You get back there again. It took you a little while to get back. What was it like the second trip there?
It was amazing. Those were the kids that my son played with all the way up since 3rd grade. Those were the kids that would be, spending the night at my house, when they were 4th graders, having a sleepover. And I knew the core group of that group, probably about 15 of them, had known me all the way up since they were 3rd graders. They all wanted to be Matadors. And to reach the pinnacle of that game, I know we didn't win it, but to get there with your son playing for you and just those kids, I mean, it was a pretty amazing night. Just the crowd, the energy, the guys from 1968 in their leather jackets from Sandia, and there were like 10 of them. I mean, and everybody was around the track. They were like right there. I mean, I'm sitting there calling a play, we're right there, and I turn around and there's a guy right here and there's a rope right there. I mean, it was just a great evening, and I know we let some things slip away. I mean, we had 2 turnovers in the green zone, going in, and that could have possibly did it, but just a great group. I mean, to come and the things they overcame, Cameron Bean coming from Texas and moving into our district really helped us, obviously. But just the group and the core group together was phenomenal.
You mentioned calling plays. How would you describe yourself as a coach? Well, not necessarily your play calling style, but your demeanor, your style at practice. How would you describe yourself as a coach?
I think for all my years, I brought high energy. I think I was a player's coach. I was willing to listen. For all my years at Manzano and Sandia, we made the sign went over that says "Close your mind to football." And when they came under that sign, I always told them, I don't want to hear about the girlfriends. I don't want to hear about the math tests. I don't want to hear about what's going on. Close your mind to football. When we come back under that sign, we can open it back up to the world and you can talk to me about anything. I really had a genuine love for all my players. I treated them like my son. I mean, I was, hard on my son as he was growing up, and if they made a mistake, I was hard on them. I think all my coaches coached hard. I let my coaches coach. I mean, I hired you to be my defensive line coach. Let's get it done. And so they, are my linebackers coach. I let my coaches coach, and I I didn't oversee or micromanage in any way, shape, or form.
Coaching your son, was it harder than you thought? Was it more rewarding than you thought? Was it easier than you thought? What was that like?
I think it was probably harder than I thought. We had some times, had some growing pains. He had a very good junior and senior year, and his sophomore year, all he did was hold for us on extra point field goals and played JV. And he got bigger and stronger and faster, and he was frustrated some his sophomore year. But then I could see him become a student of the game. That's right around when Huddle came out, and so he would come home and watch his practices. He'd come home because they videoed all the practices, and then he'd come home and watch the games and break them down. He would break down his opponents. Very cerebral in the way he attacked the game the next 2 years, on the moves he could make and the things he could do. He came up with a couple. His senior year, he scored like 4 touchdowns on the first play of the game, and he knew they were going to score based on how all his film watching he did. And we called him and went with it because we trusted the kids. Really, it was harder though. When you take some different things, different avenues, but he was always above it, and he just kept working hard. He was the hardest worker on the field. So, and I was the hardest on him though. At some point, some of those other kids, because they knew me as Kevin, as they were growing up. Hey Kevin, and they called me coach, but but they knew me as that, and so they would come over and you got to lighten up on them a little. My quarterback Craig Kaufman would tell me that. So.
You're obviously passionate about the game, passionate about the kids. What went into the decision to step away from it all then?
Well, I'd had some health issues since February, and we're still working through those. And it sort of scared me. I love this senior class that we have at Sandia. It was probably the toughest thing I've ever had to do, is tell them that I was going to step away. It's the health issues, and it's 31 years too. The health thing is going to get straightened out. But I think it was just the right time. I feel good about the decision. I don't know that I'll ever coach again, or I might coach again, or whatever will happen. I know I want to stay around the game, Coach Dotson from El Dorado said, come over to practice, and Coach House from Rio Rancho, Coach Chavis. It's like, I'm not going to be out at every practice, but, and it's with my oldest daughter moving, it was a big thing. I wanted to have the freedom to go back and see my grandbabies. So it just, a lot of things played into it. But it's another phase of life, so I'm happy about this decision.
You mentioned the health issues scared you. What scared you?
Just your immortality, I've never had something wrong with my heart or with my health, and just your immortality it gets you, and it gets inside your head. And when they tell you, this could happen, we need to figure this out, and so I just, it was time for me to get that figured out, because I want to live another 30, 40 years. I want to be around to bug you.
How difficult of a decision was it? Was it something where the pieces just came into play and you said, it's time, we got to do this? Or was it something you really wrestled over for a long time?
Oh yeah, I wrestled over a long time. I ended up telling, so I only felt it was fair. From February on, I actually knew the condition was, not what it was yet, but by the end of February. And I told my principal and AD at the end of April. It was something I had to go back and forth on. I actually had a throat surgery middle of April, and I wasn't able to talk for a week. So when you're not able to talk, you get inside your head. And I started writing those pros and cons notes and what everybody had been telling me. And so the next Friday, I think, is when I told them. And then I told the kids Friday, and I told them Thursday.
Did the doctor give you any orders in the sense that you got to stop doing this, or you got to start doing this, and you got to take care of your heart better? What did the doctor say, or how did he steer you?
Well, we're still in that process. Hopefully I'll have the game plan by the end of this week. But there's some life changes that you have to make, and one of them was the stress related to what we do, what every coach does. So that was a big thing, and the hypertension. My blood pressures went back and forth. They upped it in January, and it still didn't help my dose. So there were some things that he said we had to change, and like I said, hopefully by this week we'll have the right medication and go from there, and everything will get good, and I'll be ready to go.
So paint me a picture of life after football in the short time that you've had it so far. What's your day like? What keeps you busy? What do you do?
Well, I walk every morning. I get up and walk one of our dogs every morning when we get up, and then I come back and we have a pool in our backyard. I swim some laps, get that done. I'm not allowed to lift any weights, which lifting weights is a big part of my life the last 30 years, and so I've been trying to do far more cardio, and I lost 13 pounds this month, so that's a good thing. I'm eating better, but and then after that, it's the honey-do list is still long. I think it's long every day. And I just work around the house or run errands for my wife or those type of things. So,
how does your wife feel about your change?
She's excited. She's really excited about it. I mean, she really wants to travel. Her job gives her flexibility to travel. So we're going to do some things here in the fall and here in July, and we'll see what happens down the road.
Speaking of the fall, what's that first Friday night going to be like for you? Is it something where you're going to have to be there to get your fill of football, or you're going to have to stay away because it's going to be too tough not to be on the sidelines calling the play?
Yeah, I don't know. Even and people laugh. I mean, and I've told my old assistant coaches, Coach Salinas, and I still wake up sometimes at like 4:45. Because we had 6 o'clock practice. So I'm like, at 4:45, I got to get, it's just, I've done that probably 6 or 7 times this month. I can't imagine what it's going to be like in August. I am going to go to some 2-a-day practices and practices around town, and just because they've invited me, and maybe that'll help. That first Friday is going to be difficult. I'm trying to plan some things during the fall, so, and I do want to keep in touch with the Matadors. I don't know that I will go to, I might go to live games and be on the visitor side and watch, but I'll look at on ProView networks or your guys' network and watch the games.
So I say everybody has a story, and what do you think is the title of the Kevin Barker story at this point? We've talked about what you've been through, your life, your changes, your next phase, your passion for football. If I were writing the Kevin Barker story, what would the title be?
Coach who gave all he had for his players and his school. I truly believe everything that I could give, I did. I know the last 3 years, I don't think you measure, I won a lot of games and I lost a lot of games. I don't think you measure your success on that. I think you measure it on the young man, young boy comes to you, he comes out a great young man. Then he becomes a great father, then he becomes a great husband and a great member of the community. And we have a lot of those kids that were at Sandia and Manzano that are all of that. And I think we had a part in that, myself and the coaching staffs, that I was able to formulate.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, JP.